if you've grown up as a ball boy for Sheffield United, as a player, as a manager, and you've been through everything with that club across 4 different decades, there's not a chance in hell for what you feel for Sheffield United that you would take the Sheffield Wednesday job. There's just not a chance in hell that Chris Wilder would. He would, honestly, he would rather be on the street and not get paid than take the Sheffield Wednesday job.
We've got our clip. We've got our clip for the start of the show.
Hello guys, welcome to the Sportsman Untitled, and we've got a Sheffield Derby special for you this week. It means I'm joined by our resident Sheffield Wednesday fan, Kris Voakes. We've got Ollie Mann, Sheffield United fan, and always Gab Sutton with us. That's coming up in part 2, but first we're going to have a look back at the weekend's action. Gab, I think we should start with Leeds, right? Another impressive home win against Plymouth.
Yeah, I think Plymouth Argyle made it easy for Leeds. Genuinely, I think it was a 6-3-1 that Plymouth Argyle played. Normally people say the bigger numbers to make it, emphasise. Genuinely, it was like they had a defensive line of 6, a flat midfield 3, and then poor Ryan Hardy on his own up top. So I'm not sure Argyle really laid a glove on Leeds or made the best fist of things, even with the injuries they had. But I think that's also partly something to attribute to Leeds being so dominant and having players like Pascal Struijk who are so comfortable coming out of defence and even coming up into the final third, and Ayo Tanaka, who I thought was just absolutely glorious on Saturday. So Leeds United looking very strong and clear among favourites for top 2.
Kris, you agreeing with Leeds being very impressive so far this season, what you've seen?
Yeah, I've said it before already this season. They look like the strongest outfit. When they're on their best, they're clearly better than anyone else, I think. And again, I come on and defend Plymouth quite a lot, but nobody expects Plymouth to be anything but a bottom 6 side, really. And I think you'd hand most Plymouth fans 20th or 21st right now, they'd take it. But as Gab said, it was just the style of things at times. They didn't have a meaningful shot at goal. That I think the one was generous a little bit. The 6-3-1. When you're talking about your one being 40 yards from your own goal for most of the game, it kind of tells a story. It didn't pan out any different to how I expected, really. The big surprise was it was an 8-minute blast of 3 goals, and other than that, Plymouth kind of, took it. I think at the half-time, 3-0, I think Rooney was just begging for it to be 3-0 at full-time.
And Ollie, Leeds title contenders for you?
Oh, by far, yeah. For me, they're best team in the division. We went to Elland Road, and to be honest, we almost played like Plymouth, where we played as though we weren't going to get a glove on them, and they just did what they do. I think they've got those ricks in them. They've got to look at maybe the goalkeeper, some of those opportunities going forward where they're just so wasteful in front of goal, but they are by far the standout team in the division. So if they play anywhere near just even their par level, never mind the top level they can go to, I think they'll be fine. I think they should be definite automatic promotion, if not just runaway title winners.
If you make 25 chances in the game, you can miss a few, can't you?
There seems to be everyone 3-0 at home as well. It's quite a ridiculous home record. A team slightly struggling at the minute, Gab, is Burnley, faltering in front of goal. Defeat this weekend, struggling for goals. What's going on? Is Scott Parker to blame?
I think there's obviously 9 injuries at the moment doesn't help, but then you kind of mitigate that with the fact they've got a squad of 33 players. You can probably 24 when you've got 9 injuries isn't too bad. But I think there's definitely an issue, I think, in terms of the link between the midfield and attack. Burnley fans have talked about maybe needing another striker. Lyle Foster's injured at the moment. They've got Andres Hontoji, who they signed for, I think, the Belgian league in the summer. But the big problem for me, I'm not sure Josh Brownhill's a number 10. I'm not sure Bashir Humphreys is a left back. I think he's more of a centre back. So I think they've got issues across the team, and it seems like when they're building up, their wide players are so far apart. Normally you want to be able to at least get into a situation where Kalesho and Jayden Anthony can combine with Hauntonji and get into some good areas. And I think Kalesho was desperately trying to do that, in certain moments. But in the early phases build up, when they're so far apart, normally you'd want your fullbacks to be the ones hugging the touchline rather than your wingers, because then it becomes difficult to get any sort of combination play together, and I think that's what we've seen. And Burnley just have real difficulty for me creating chances, and I see that problem staying.
And Ollie, it's interesting because obviously Burnley came down with you from the Premier League, didn't have a great season either, had a bit of summer turmoil with company leaving. What's your kind of view on them as a promotion rival, I'd say?
They're such a weird team because I think in the summer, everyone looked at them. I particularly did. I thought they'll just win the league. I thought you looked at the squad, we talked there, 33 players. You just think if anyone can weather the depth that you need in the Championship, if anyone can get through injuries, they're going to be the team. With Scott Parker coming in, you thought, safe pair of hands. He's done this before. He takes teams, he doesn't make them better than they are, but he gives them all the tools they need to just do the job, get over the line. We saw it with Fulham, saw it with Bournemouth. I expected to see the same again with Burnley, and you might say results are going okay. They've had a bit of a bad run of form, but they're still well up there, still well within the top 6, still looking fairly well set, but they just look so poor. They do not pass the eye test, and at some point they're going to have to start creating chances. We talked about this a bit last week, where I was saying that last time they were in the Championship, they had an outstanding player, Manuel Benson, who every single week did the same thing. They didn't create any chances, but someone smacked one in from 30 yards, they won the league. Will they do that again? And actually, the more we talk about it, the more we think about it, maybe not.
It's a great point, Ollie, but I think if you put Luca Colescio in the 22-23 Burnley team and you put Manuel Benson in the 24-25 Burnley team, I think you'd get the same. I think the system makes it a lot easier for the individuals to sort of produce what they want to.
I'm really not sure on Parker in general and Burnley in general. I mean, if I had to pick one of that top 6 not to finish there in terms of the big clubs, I'd be picking Burnley right now. Chris, have you got a view on Parker and Burnley right now?
Yeah, same here. I think as much as we can look at this and just kind of point a finger at Scott Parker after the heavy defeat that led to him leaving Bournemouth and then his short spell at Club Brugge, you can say, from a fan's point of view, it looks a bit of a strange appointment, but that has got to bleed into the squad a little bit as well. They know their football, and I think under Company, who clearly is massively respected within the game, they were buying into a vision. They proved it when they got promoted last time. Parker is a little bit removed from that guy who got Fulham and Bournemouth up now. And I think some of what's happened more recently might start to weigh on the players' minds in moments where they're going away from home. It's not coming together quite as well as you'd hope. And a team like Millwall is going to have a plan and really stick to it. You've got to buy into your manager at times like that. And I don't know whether they're at that level that they were with Company at all.
Be very interesting to see how they go moving forward. He could come under pressure quite quickly, I think. Gab, good time to talk about our in-depth focus from last week, Watford. Sorry, Chris.
And I'll be louder.
We have to talk about them because we talked about their poor away form and their amazing home form. Then they went and beat Sheffield Wednesday, hit them for 6.
Yeah.
What on earth, mate? What do you make of that?
That's a performance that has made me revise my perception on Watford. I didn't buy them in the first quarter of the season because I felt like there was something about them that I didn't trust, especially some of those no-shows, and maybe Ollie can expand on that based on their performance at Bramall Lane. But I'm starting to see a formula based on that performance at Hillsborough. Hopefully they can build on it. Where Shaq Fatadze, I would almost give Shaq Fatadze man of the match at Hillsborough, because I think even though Vakun Bayo scored 4 goals, because Shaq Fatadze just looked at the hub of everything good that Watford did, and then they've got great one-on-one players like Kwadwo Bar out on the right, who's really impressed me at the moment, and they looked a bit more balanced, and one of those no shows on the other side of Sheffield has kind of been put to the past, really. So you've got to credit Tom Cleverley because he inherited such an imbalanced squad, and there were so many question marks over them going into the season. I think they're answering one or two of those right now.
I'll let either of you jump in on this.
I think it's really interesting. I think the point about Cleverley as well is really important, because I was reading some reflections, I think it was from Bayo this weekend, where he'd said that actually Cleverley had given him tips on how to score against Beadle. He'd watched him in previous games, and he said he comes out, he goes low very quickly, he commits himself. And so the chip that he'd scored was a premeditated move where Cleverley had identified a weakness in Wednesday's system and he'd worked to exploit it. I also thought that this weekend really showed them willing to be different. At Bramall Lane, they'd obviously got a system that they wanted to play, they wanted to stick to it, and ultimately it just didn't produce anything. They couldn't break United down, they couldn't create chances, they had nothing different to try and offer. So once the plan A didn't work, there was nothing behind it. Whereas I felt at Hillsborough, they actually tweaked themselves a little bit. They recognised first half. They were probably, I think Wednesday were the better team, probably feel a little bit unlucky that it was 1-1 at half time. And then Watford come out and they're a different team in that second half because they shifted their system a little bit, went a little bit more direct, really tried to expose Wednesday's high line to get in behind. And I thought that actually is a massive tribute towards Cleverley because he recognised the issue and addressed it. And so again, I still think they're running very hot. I think they're going to drop fairly significantly, but I certainly see them as much better than I did pre-season when I had a big question mark over their manager. He's proved himself to be a little bit innovative. He's willing to change, and I think that really stands him in good stead for the rest of the season.
Chris, give us the Wednesday perspective.
I thought that was the end of that section. As Ollie said, that Wednesday were the better team first half. The first goal was not exactly against the run of the play, but it was a bit of a surprise. And when we got level within 5 minutes, you kind of thought, well, the game's going to come to us now. And the start of the second half, it was like watching a game like 3 years apart from the first half because Watford came out with a bit more purpose. I thought the atmosphere was suddenly very flat, like everyone expected the game to just come to Wednesday. I love Dishon Bernard for the most part, but he is prone to the occasional rick, and it was a bit of an aberration sticking his hand out as he did, and the tide just wasn't with us after that. It was a weird one in that when Valentine made it 4-2, I'm thinking we can easily get 2 more against these. There's going to be a fair bit of added time, and there's still 8 minutes to go. Because look at Watford's record. There's only Wednesday, Plymouth and Portsmouth who conceded more goals. Like, they are prone to conceding goals, and it wasn't like a sustained period of pressure that Wednesday had got the goal and you're suddenly thinking there's a chance, but then Ebersele makes a brilliant Cruyff turn out right back to lose Jamal Lowe, plays a fantastic ball through, great finish by Bayo, the game's dead and buried, and yet they could have scored 7 or 8 because they just kept coming, and that was the big thing about Watford in the second half. It got to 3-1, they didn't think, right, we can have this at 3-1, let's just sit back. They just kept going and going and going.
Wednesday, you mentioned that people might be looking ahead to the derby, and we will come into our in-depth preview on the derby. We've got midweek games to come. It feels like, from both fan bases perhaps, they're slightly being ignored ahead of next Sunday.
Yeah, United go to a pretty hot Bristol City. Are they 8 unbeaten, I think? Wednesday got Norwich at home, who've got something to prove, having dominated most of the game against Cardiff and still lost. You can easily overlook the fact that this happens with a lot of sports, with a lot of derbies. It becomes almost too much of a focus, especially when you've got a lot of games around that period of time. We might go to Bramall Lane and win on Sunday. I don't think we will, but we'll get there. We might go to Bramall Lane and win on Sunday, but if we've lost at home to Watford and Norwich before that, that's a poor return from the week, and you're also then worrying about a home form having won 2 out of 8 or whatever at that point. So, yeah, I do wonder how much that kind of played on everything in the second half with the atmosphere, with the players, because it's not happened in 5.5 years. So this one takes on that little bit more importance than if we were playing them twice a year.
Talk to me about the role Barry Bannon's playing, Chris, because I sort of, Barry Bannon, as you've known, watching Wednesday for the last 10 years, well, for more than the last 10 years, but for the 10 years that Barry Bannon's been playing. Subtle. But I sort of feel with Bannon, brilliant technician. I don't think he's mobile enough to really go and press. I think he can struggle with that side of the game at this age. But then I also think you look at the impact Shea Charles has made, for instance, on the defensive side and doing some of that work. And I just wonder, can you get away with having somebody that's not very mobile defensively and also might struggle to press, even if they are a phenomenal technician?
I think the thing with Bannon, he has the elements of a number 10 about him without being a number 10, in that if you think of the old Italian ways of having a number 10, they're the ones who don't do an awful lot, because when you get them on the ball, they're going to cause havoc. But whenever he's been tried as a number 10, it just doesn't fit at all. I remember when Steve Bruce was manager, very briefly, and he put Bannon on the left for a game away to Millwall, because he said, I remember Sheffield Wednesday being great in 15, 16, 17 with Barry Bannon on the left. That was just because he couldn't get in the midfield with Kieran Lee and Sam Hutchinson and Alex Lopez at the time. So,
but also, like Barry Bannon in mid-2010s, he's a very different proposition to late 2010s.
He still has those moments where he'll belt back, win a ball. There was like one of the big games that we had at the end of last season was away to Blackburn. that first goal that Josh Windass scored came because Bannon belted and made a crucial tackle. But it's the kind of, I kind of call it the John Terry way. It's like, it's not necessarily structured defending. It's everything on the line defending. It's not cutting out, being like anticipating that trouble in the first place. It's reacting to the trouble. That's how he kind of helps out on a defensive level. He said himself that Shea Charles's introduction has probably been why he's scored a couple of goals and had a hand in a few more things of late, because Charles does a lot of that work for him, which I don't think is a bad thing. That's how you dovetail in the midfield a lot of the time. It's just, I think it is just down to that fact that, like I said, 15, 16, 17, we had Fernando Forestieri and Ross Wallace and other players causing a lot of havoc, and it wasn't only Bannon, whereas it is only Bannon for a lot of the Wednesday play these days.
Is there a world where Bannon becomes a game changer from the bench and you actually start with Shea Charles, Svante Ingolson and Josh Windass as sort of the 10?
Possibly, because I said at the start of the season, this will be the first season where Barry Bannon plays 35 games instead of 45. Well, he's played every game so far, and I think there is that question that's coming up. Even I think it was, I forget what score it was on Saturday, but Shea Charles came on. So he went off with about 25 minutes to go as Rohl made a few changes, and I did think, is this just the time you take Bannon off and protect him for 2 big games to come, or do you still think you can win it, or at least draw it at 3-1 down, which you would hope. At home, 3-1, you're thinking we can at least get 2 more out of this. We can get back into the game. I wouldn't want a manager just sitting on 3-1 and going, well, we'll take that at home against a side like Watford who do concede goals. So I can understand him leaving Bannon on, but there will be games, and there have been games already. Luton away, he came off 20, 25 minutes from the end. He's still very much a starter. I don't know about what he'd be like as an impact player. But it's then... A lot of the time when you look at a Wednesday team without Bannon in there, it's just missing a spark, because he does provide that.
Every time I watch Sheffield Wednesday, I always think we could get a Bannon here, and every time he's brilliant. So, I mean, if he's still doing it, he's still doing it, isn't he?
Yeah, and, so often, you'll know it from your own teams or watching other teams or whatever, you can have those games where you think, Bannon's been a bit quiet today, but you're live on Sky and they see him once every 6 weeks instead of twice a week, and they go, oh, look at the smooth operator, here's the man of the match award, and you kind of remember that a lot of people kind of take him for granted.
Let's move on a little bit to Sheffield United, the red side of Sheffield. Ended Blackburn's winning home run this season. Are you well up for automatic promotion now? Are you contenders?
Yeah, I think we are. I think I've had a lot of question marks over United for the start of this season, as lots of people who sort of have heard me speak will know, because all the way through I've been saying, well, that first bit, we've not played anyone. We've kept teams at arm's length, but we've not played anyone good. Then we came into this sort of run of games after the international break and went away to Leeds and, to be honest, surrendered a little bit. We kind of went there and said, well, if this finishes 0-0, delighted. If they score, well... we've cooked as goose. And that's what happened. They beat us. We then went to Middlesbrough, and it was a pretty even game with Middlesbrough. I thought Middlesbrough probably did edge it in the end, but it took a really good goal to beat us. And that seemed to temper expectations. I felt a little bit justified in saying, yeah, we are probably a playoff team. We're probably 4th to 6th, something like that. But I think these last 2 performances, particularly the one against Blackburn, has really sort of made me think, actually, I think we might have something here. And it wasn't so much about the fact that we have gone there and created chances and tore them apart. It's the control that we can exhibit in just about every scenario. I accept that Leeds are the best team in the division. We tried something, it didn't work. But against Blackburn, a Blackburn team who've been flying at home, I think they've got 16 points from 18. Eustace really knows how to set up his team to make sure they're effective. And we just didn't give them anything. They've not had a shot on target in 90 minutes. We've been winning for over an hour and they've still not been able to break us down or create anything. That level of control that we can exhibit, not just against the bottom teams, but probably against anybody who's not going to be a playoff contender, that is something that I've not seen United have for a very long time. Even last time we went up, it wasn't that controlled, and that feels like a difference maker.
I think it's 6 goals conceded, joint lowest in the league with Burnley, 9 clean sheets already. I mean, that's going to get you in the top 2 if that continues. Simple as that.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And that defence, particularly, we put together Anel and Harry Souttar, and I think they've only conceded in 2 games when they've actually played together, and they must have played 9 now. And so it's really shown that having those two, a really strong defensive partnership, just stands out, and it's made us so much more solid. Yeah, I think it's going to be promotion built on defence, but promotion works for me.
Michael Cooper as well. Go on, Gab.
Well, I was just going to ask you, I'm sure we'll come on to Michael Cooper, but I wanted to ask you about Harrison Burrows, Ollie, because in his Peterborough days, he was clearly a huge talent, but they had difficulty sort of pinning him down into one position. In that left-back role where he's kind of flying forward, whether it's to overlap Gus Harmer or Callum O'Hare, but I think I love the fact that he's got that technical ability, but he's also can cross on the fly. Do you know what I mean? He's got that dynamism about him as well. Would you class him as one of your best players at the moment?
Yeah, he's one. I think he's taken some time to adjust to the league, to be honest. I think his first few games, he was really settling into that position. I think he was used to having a little bit more freedom down that left, particularly having been playing sort of as a wing back for Peterborough. Settling into the left back role has taken him quite a bit of time. But I think it was Swansea at home where he really got down that side. He put in an absolutely unbelievable cross, which eventually created the goal, which we won 1-0. And he's not looked back since then. That's really felt as though he's gone, actually, yeah, I belong here. I can make these impacts. I can have this kind of way of playing in the Championship. And he's gone from strength to strength since then. I thought this weekend was the first time we properly saw him go in terms of being a really attacking left back. But I don't think it's a coincidence that's when Jack Robinson had come into the team. Because I talked about Anel and Harry Souttar being a fantastic partnership. They're both right-sided. They're both right-footed. They both naturally are going to the right-hand side. They've been brilliant together, and they can cover the left. But it was notable this weekend that we've got Jack Robinson in, a left-footer, naturally plays towards the left, slotted in behind Burrows, which then saw him be his most creative going forward. And it does ask that question of, is that a better balance to the team? Does that get more out of players such as Harrison Burrows to show who they are and really prove themselves to be not just one of the best players at United, but maybe one of the best players in the league for his position? But he's got to be able to have that opportunity. So it's interesting how we look at that balance, I think, for the season.
Yeah, I suppose because you've got on the right, you've got Alfie Gilchrist, who's much more of a steady, massive fan of. Yeah. I love the way you said that. But I think he offers a very steady presence, and I guess that kind of gives you a bit of balance. It does give Burrows a bit more freedom.
Completely. And Vinny Souza as well, I think we need to definitely shout out, because I'll be honest, strong words, I hated the man last season. It was one of those.
Your players last season, you got about 3 points.
Yes, I hated all of them. You make a good point, actually. Maybe we'll move on. But no, I couldn't stand him because his attitude felt off. It really felt as though he wasn't giving his all for United. He'd come to England expecting to be the big man. It wasn't working. He was blaming the club, blaming his players. Wasn't taking that personal responsibility. This season, I'm seeing a leader, somebody who is taking all of that responsibility on himself. You'll see it whenever we're on the telly that he is the standout player in this United team, because all of our control comes from him stopping anybody being able to really put us under sustained pressure. He wins tackles. He's so much stronger than his opposition that he's always a calming presence for us. But his role in slotting into that defence and allowing a little bit more freedom, making sure we've got the balance, really works. And so I think he's the player that we noticed how much we missed him when he was suspended against Borough, sorry. And so he's one of the players that he's going to pick up suspensions. He might go missing from time to time, but in terms of creating that balance through our defence, he's the one who's really knitting it all together, I think, at the moment.
Brilliant stuff. And before we crack into the full Sheffield Derby preview, Gab, are there any other talking points? This is a big wink wink. Any results you've seen from this weekend that you might just want to, give credit for? Any starting performances you want to quickly mention?
Well, what about Coventry City and their 3-0 victory at Middlesbrough? Yeah, I think really impressed by Coventry. I think you've got to mention Josh Eccles in midfield with a goal and an assist. And I think what's interesting is Coventry started the game really well. And actually, the weird thing is, the 3-0 win would suggest that once the red card happened, Coventry really took control. But actually, reading people like Dom Jerams on the Sideways Sammy blog, which is great insight on Coventry City, it actually took Coventry a while to adjust to the advantage of having that extra man after Hayden Hackney was sent off. But in the end, they were able to convert with some set-piece proficiency.
You can't kind of do that as Hayden Hackney, though, can you? 22 minutes in, it was a stupid second yellow card. You're leaving your guys short, and as well as kind of Borough reacting initially to the red card. he's let his mates down there. I think.
Had to live up to his name, didn't he? Yacked his knee off nearly. Right, let's crack on to part 2 and our Sheffield Derby special. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and if there's a bit of disagreement, Gab, you can have the final say, I think. So,
I'm not used to that sort of responsibility.
12:30, Super Sunday, the superest of Sundays, at Bramall Lane, Sheffield United versus Sheffield Wednesday. I'm going to start with a easy, silly debate, maybe. Which club is bigger? Ollie, state your case.
Look, big is always one of those things it's really difficult to define. It's one of those questions where people will argue about it all day long. But ultimately, if we're talking about this in recent history, Wednesday haven't played in the Premier League since the turn of the millennium. You know, we're talking about a sustained period now of a club who haven't been able to get themselves back at that place. United have been there. We've been towards the top end of the Championship. We've been playing in the Premier League. We've been in 4 FA Cup semi-finals, 3 League Cup semi-finals. We're not winning. And so people will say, yeah, Wednesday won the League Cup. You know, they've still got the more recent in terms of winning trophies, in terms of being that club. And you can't argue against that. They are the facts. But ultimately, for 20 years now, United have been the dominant club in Sheffield. And ultimately, that has to count for something, because it's not just 2 years, oh, look at that, we're finally better. This has been a long time coming now. And we are a club who are ready to make that next step to be a Premier League team for the long term. And I think ultimately that would be what puts this debate completely to bed.
Chris?
He's right. No, I hear so much from like fans who, you know, you say you're a Wednesday fan and they go, oh, well, yeah, massive club. But it's fans my age who remember us in the Premier League. It's been too long. It feels like 2016 was a bit of a sliding doors moment. At the time, it just felt like this is the start of something. And then it didn't happen. 2017, when we lost on penalties to Huddersfield, was arguably our time. And it didn't happen. And that was at a time when United just couldn't get out of the third tier. They, you know, I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 2015 or 2016 when United are doing a lap of appreciation around Bramall Lane at the end of the season. There's about probably 800 people left. People shouting, "This is what we think here," and just basically going in on the players. And then. We could talk about that all day if you want.
How much did you hate that squad?
No, but at the time, I think some of that fan response was also because Wednesday were flying, they had money, they looked like they were ready for the Premier League, and Chris Wilder turned it around. And since then, you know, United have come to Hillsborough beating us 4-2. There were a couple of nip and tuck games after that. We've not got the chance to play them in 5.5 years because we've either been in League One or United have been in the Premier League. So we're finally back kind of on a level pegging, but you know, they're still one of the kind of parachuted Premier League teams who have got the chance to go back up. We're still one of those who are trying to find a way to actually have that even keel from which to springboard. And for all of the, you know, winning the League Cup in 91, like being historically bigger in the past, that means nothing now. Like we were good. That's another way of saying a club is bigger. So
I think as well, though, there's some really interesting points in there about those sliding doors moments, because I actually think so many of the sliding doors moments for what happens in Sheffield in terms of how the clubs go, in terms of the perception of them, come down to really big moments that you can pinpoint to derbies. Yeah. I think inherently they seem to drive the narrative of what happens for both clubs. You know, we saw it in deep breath. Come on, don't cry. We saw it in 2012 when obviously United were a long way ahead. It was the derby we could afford to lose. We couldn't. I think we couldn't. And that changed the narrative. For 5 or 6 years, Wednesday did have that run that took you to those playoff finals, and definitely the one against Huddersfield. I think looking back, Carvajal threw that one away. That was yours, and that was your year, really, because the teams that got promoted weren't as good as the Wednesday team that unfortunately just weren't able to make it. But then the derby at Hillsborough, the 4-2, again changes that narrative. You can pinpoint those two moments as being the defining, probably, moments of the 2010s for both Sheffield clubs, in that one changed the narrative to Wednesday being able to go on a run. The other one has took United to where we are today, and the time in the Premier League and the momentum and success that came with it. And, well, from my perspective, you have to hope that this weekend's just not another one of those. It was
1 minute as well, wasn't it? It was like Lucas João equalises from 2-0 down, it's 2-2, you're looking at the league table, and I think they were probably level pegging at that point, and then Brooks goes the other end and scores, and
Duffy
goes the other end and scores, I should say, and it shows how much I've tried to put that out of the back of my mind, doesn't it?
And I will never let anyone forget.
But United went on, finished above us that season, and I don't think we've got close since. Just that's been the way of it the last, well, other than 2012, like for too much of the past 25 years.
Gab, let's get your view on both Sheffield clubs and kind of where they sit at the moment as well.
I think if you're a Yorkshire club and you're not Leeds and you're neither of the Sheffield clubs, you absolutely despise Leeds United and Sheffield Wednesday, and you don't mind Sheffield United typically. And that makes me think. I think that's accurate, and that makes me think that Sheffield Wednesday, for me, carries slightly more in terms of prestige, just because more people hate them. And I think that. For me, the name Sheffield Wednesday carries something in terms of the historic success in the previous century, and I still think that slightly outweighs. I think Sheffield Wednesday, when they've been at their best, have maybe been more successful than Sheffield United when they've been at their best, even though Sheffield United have had more success in recent history. So it's very close to huge clubs that both belong in the Premier League with fantastic fan bases. If you were to push me for who's the bigger club, I would personally lean towards Sheffield Wednesday.
I think that's fair. I think as well, the impact of that in terms of that sort of what name carries more weight, I think so much of that comes to Hillsborough. I think so much of it comes with the ground, with the history of the ground, with how many times it's been used for England, for World Cups, for Euros. That carries its own weight. And I think that is something that you can't overcome, but it is also history. And I think it's, for United, the point is that there's not got to be a chip on your shoulder. You've not got to think about it in terms of what have they done in the past. We've got to look at the recency and say, actually, this is our time. Yeah. And we've just got to make it count and maybe use this platform to change that narrative for everybody. And maybe we can be hated. Come on, guys. We're awful.
If you think back to the 90s, which I try to a lot as a Wednesday fan, Sheffield United, like under Dave Bassett, with like the scrappy side that, you know, would niggle and they were a kind of hated side of sorts at the time. On Wednesday, but the kind of culture club, if you like the, you know, Chris Waddle and John Sheridan, and it was like it was. But even before this, so the 1993 FA Cup semi-final, everyone was billing it as like the stylish club against the battlers, and it really was that kind of thing at the time. And I wouldn't say United are necessarily like the stylish Chris Waddle, John Sheridan levels at all, but at the same time, these days, it's United that play a style of football that, you know, exactly what they're trying to do, and they do it with a little bit of class about what they do. We're trying to kind of get to a level where people really can't find those holes in our system still at this point, because, you know, we can go out and batter Plymouth first day of the season and look like Svante Ingolsson's the greatest signing in the world. But then I think I said 2 days later, like, I just wonder what if teams start to exploit behind him, and they did quickly, and we've still not found an answer arguably since then.
Let's bring it forward to the modern day, because the next debate is which manager would you rather have in charge, and I'm expecting you to back your own horses here, Chris Wilder or Danny Rohl. Chris, I know you're a big Danny Rohl fan, even though this season perhaps hasn't been as successful as pre-season hoped.
We're still, what, 4 or 5 points off Millwall in 7th? There's a lot. I've seen enough of teams this season to think we're not a lot worse than a lot of teams in this league. One win against Norwich on Tuesday night, and at least something out of the derby, and suddenly we're going into the international break with a much better outlook. We're joint 13th up there with you. Joint 13th if you look at it another way, rather than, you know, we're 18th in the table. So I still believe in Danny Rohl. I still say, for the most part, I did say at the start of the season, he's got everything at the club the way he wants it. He could have probably done with one goal scoring striker in the transfer window. He probably thought he was getting that in Ike Ugbo, but he's just not delivered in the same way that he did last season. He probably needs a run in the side. But all told, the way that he's tried to restructure everything about the playing side of the club, the backroom staff that he's brought in, the way that he's kind of really considered about everything, you just need to look at a poor Wednesday performance this season and look at him on the touchline, and he's absolutely livid at you know, some of the fundamental errors that people are making, because he knows he's got this vision, exactly what he wants from the side. He's not getting it at the moment, and that's part of his job. But for the most part, we couldn't look more different as a football club to what we did a year ago.
Just as a follow-up to that, What would have happened if, when Xisco Munoz left, Chris Wilder was announced as Sheffield Wednesday manager? Where would you be now?
In a state of ire, I think, because he's Chris Wilder. In the same way that there's this kind of famous old story in Sheffield now that I think it was before Alan Irvine was appointed, after Brian Laws had been sacked, that Milan Mandaric approached Neil Warnock on a Friday, and Warnock said, leak it to the press that you're going to appoint me and come back to me on Monday and you won't give me the job. And he did exactly that. Mandaric called him up on Monday morning and said, you're right, Neil. Because there's no way, like, you know, Danny Rohl lost 5 of his first 6 games in charge. If that was Wilder,
also,
there'd have been...
Can I just come in on that? It's kind of a redundant question because there's not a chance in hell that Chris Wilder would... You know, he'd rather have a cactus strapped to his backside.
I think he would have took it. I think he'd have happily took it.
I think he's bullshit enough to take that on.
And he'd took him down to League One. He'd have loved it.
Well, it was Warnock's whole line, wasn't it? If you ever offered the Sheffield Wednesday job, what would you do? He said, I'd take it, get him relegated and retire to Plymouth or to Cornwall. But no, I think there's a chance he would have taken it because...
No chance would Chris Wilder have taken the Sheffield Wednesday job. Absolutely not a chance in hell that would have happened.
Where did Rafa Benitez go once upon a time? It happens with managers.
That's a completely different...
It happens with managers, but my point being...
No, I'm not... Rafa Benitez doesn't have a historic... It's not... Steven Gerrard would never have taken the Everton job. So it's like, it's a completely different... If you've grown up as a ball boy for Sheffield United, as a player, as a manager, and you've been through everything with that club across 4 different decades, there's not a chance in hell for what you feel for Sheffield United that you would take the Sheffield Wednesday job. There's just not a chance in hell that Chris Wilder would. He would, honestly, he would rather be on the street and not get paid than take the Sheffield Wednesday job.
We've got our clip for the start of the show.
I'll tweet it.
Ollie, let's come to you and have your argument for Chris Wilder over Danny Rohl anyway. I
mean, I think there's 2 halves to this question. I think there's the half of who do you want managing your football club and who do you think is probably going to manage at a higher level. And I think there are 2 sides to that question. I think there is nobody in football I would want managing United more than Chris Wilder. He has proven me wrong time and time again, because when he came back last year, I said repeatedly, I would not have made that. I don't think that's the right move. I think this is going to be a mistake.
That's like eating sandwiches in the referee.
That's exactly what I like to do. Well, partly though for that reason, because the way he handles some of the media, the way that he presents himself, some of the things that he comes out and says, it's not necessarily what you want. And it's also when your team's on the floor and they've been battered week after week after week, as we were last year, you don't really want someone to come out and be chippy, because you think, well, we haven't got the right to do this. No. We kind of have to just take our licks right now, and we can't afford to have that. And so I thought it was a mistake, and I was wrong, because he's completely rebuilt the club, the playing structure, the way that we have approached this season is completely, once again, like he did last time, on his back. And so there is nobody better placed to manage Sheffield United than Chris Wilder. He just gets it. The club get him, he gets the club, and it works. And it has worked time and time again. And I think so much of the reflections on his first time with us, we focused on that failure towards the end. But that failure came when there were no fans there. There was nobody for him to feed off. He wasn't connected to a club anymore. He was playing in an empty stadium that he couldn't work with, that he couldn't connect with. And so there is nobody I would want managing Sheffield United more than Chris Wilder, for his tactics, for the way he's connected to the club, for the way that he represents us. In terms of who's going to manage at a higher level, I think Danny Rohl will probably be the answer to that question, because I think he will.
Season by any chance?
Hopefully, yeah, but not with you. Because I think there's a definite chance that, you know, you see the conversations even now, if, say, Russell Martin was to leave Southampton, so much of Ralph Hasenhüttl's success comes when he's worked with Danny Rohl and his backroom staff. Do Southampton go, actually, let's have some of that again? We've seen that he can prove himself as a number one. So I think there is a chance that Rohl moves on to a higher level, but he wouldn't work at Sheffield United. The way he's playing, the way he's presenting himself, you know, you referenced it before about this sort of perspective of the clubs. United work best with a Chris Wilder. You know, we had it with Neil Warnock. We had it to an extent with Danny Wilson, even when he was there. These are managers who understand what it is to be in Sheffield with Sheffield United, and they work for us. And so there's no manager I'd want more than Chris Wilder.
I love your passion there. But playing devil's advocate, is Chris Wilder not incredibly lucky this season to be managing 3 or 4 or 5 players who should be playing in the Premier League?
Yeah.
So is he not Scott Parker in disguise?
Would we have those players if Chris Wilder hadn't rebuilt the club in 2016 to take us to where we were? All of our success, the money that we've had to bring in, Gus Harmer, Vinny Souza, any of these players who are now seen as being above the level, the only reason they're playing for Sheffield United is because of the work of Chris Wilder to rebuild us, because they weren't coming and playing in 2014 in League One when we're booing them around a lap of appreciation. They're not coming to that version of Sheffield United. There's no way they are. And so what he did is he found the best way to take us from there to who we are now. And so rather than being lucky to have those players, he's the only reason they're here.
I think as well, the answer to the question lies in last season.
Yeah.
Because Wilder came in December, barely won a game again after that, took the time to kind of get everything in order for this season. Whereas Danny Well came in, lost 5 of the first 6 games, and there's no way that Wilder would have got away with that at Wednesday because they were already protesting the stadium about the owner and everything else. If Chansiri then gives Wilder the job, God knows what would have happened at that club. But there's no way Wednesday fans would have been able to take Wilder at the club, whereas
both probably landed in exactly the right place. If we're being honest, like if we look at it from a neutral's perspective, I would say Rohl is the right man at the right time for Wednesday, and Wilder is the right man probably at any time for United. And so the way that that's worked means that both clubs will probably reflect on this question very, very differently. And United fans will go, you're still 18th, what are you talking about? Well, you were dead and buried when he came in. Like, he's changed everything about the club to give you an opportunity to say, actually, we're only 5 points off the playoffs, rather than saying, God help us, because we need something.
12 points better off.
Final point on Wilder. I think a huge component of this is buy-in, where sometimes it's not just about the objective level of the manager themselves, but how much the football club buys into them. So I put a tweet out, with I think a poll around, I think it might have been May, sort of asking Sheffield United fans, because I was curious after relegation from the Premier League, how many of them were on board with Chris Wilder for next season, and how many of them felt like change might have been needed, or he might not be the right man. I was actually really surprised that I think I would reckon about 80% of the responses I got were pro Wilder. So that shows the emotional connection that he has with the club, and kind of buys people in, gets people to buy in, and so when you add to that, it creates a better environment where the fans are bought in, and then you've got the individual quality. And I'm sure Wilder's done very well with what he's had, but you add the individual quality of the players and some of those players that we've talked about, with the fact that the fans are all in, and it's made for a good combination.
Ollie, a quick question for you. Would you rather finish second this season and lose both derby matches 3-0 to Sheffield Wednesday, or finish third but beat them twice?
It's such a horrible question, because that's well, do you know what though? There is another side to this, which is that coming off the back of last season, do I want to go and play in the Premier League again? Do I really want to go and lose 8-0 at home and then go, well, what chance did we have it with Premier League? It's that kind of scenario of last season took away so much of your enthusiasm for football. Like people who, like my sister, for example, this year, she goes, but it's just, I can see that it's not the same for her. She's not as... There's a difference in the way that you've engaged with football, because last season was so painful that almost to protect yourself, you kind of go, well, it's only football. It's so much more than that, and it hurts. And so probably tied into the fact that if we don't get promoted and we get to enjoy another season in the Championship and it's similar to this one, I also don't want to lose 3-0 to Wednesday. I'm trying to dress it up. I'm trying to give all the excuses in the world. There's no way I want to lose to Wednesday.
It's the journey being the destination, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of Ipswich fans talk about it at the moment. Like the last couple of years they've had have been phenomenal. It's like, was it all worth it? Like if you're not getting wins, and I think there's something to be said for coming down and spending 2 or 3 years outside the Premier League, because then you can kind of regather that energy for a Premier League season as a fan base, as a club as a whole. Because at the minute, like as much as I say Wednesday aren't a million miles off the playoffs, like if we somehow scab the playoff win this year, it's going to take a massive overhaul to even get us to Ipswich level, let alone anything else.
And it's also that side of, I've been to Old Trafford, I've been to Anfield, I've been to Villa Park, I've been to Stamford Bridge, I've been to the Emirates. So where's the fun in going again? If I go again next year, I saw us lose 5-0 last time we were at the Emirates. Do I really want to go again? Is my heart really saying, I tell you what, let's get back to the Emirates. Maybe it'll be 6 this time.
I've been to Bradford.
Yeah, give us a quick assessment of how do we see this game panning out, and who are the danger men to look out for on each side for you?
Well, I feel like what Sheffield Wednesday maybe have in their favour is that the style of play seems to be effective in some games. I think it can be vulnerable to pace. And I suppose Sheffield United not having an awful lot of that in their attack possibly lends into Sheffield Wednesday's favour. But at the same time, you've still got Callum O'Hare to defend against. You've still got Shezlan Laksaki, who's got a little bit of pace. He can kind of go either way. Kiefer Moore's obviously more of a target man, possibly had his best game for the club on Saturday in that 2-0 victory at Blackburn. So, yeah, I think you have to make Sheffield United favourites, but I anticipate a close game.
Yeah, I mean, clearly United are going to go in as favourites. I worry. I think there are some things that Wednesday have got that will hurt United a little bit. I think what always scares me, what happened against Leeds, it's the wingers. The wingers cause so many problems for United in terms of overloading through the fullbacks. We've talked about Harrison Burrows, the way he wants to get forward, but that means that Gassama and Masaba, they've got space to get in behind, particularly with their pace to try and get away. I think in our favour, we should have control of the game. Where we will potentially struggle is if we allow it the occasion to get more than us. If we get too carried away, if we let it all just run a little bit further, that is where Wednesday will thrive. But I think this team have been so good at control, have been so good and organised in terms of limiting the other team, not letting them get on top of us, not letting them break us down, just not giving away chances, that I expect it to be a pretty boring game. I don't think it's going to be one for the neutral. The last three have finished 0-0. It wouldn't shock me if this one finished 0-0. I like to think we'll be on the right side of a tight game, though, because we have got players who have got this X factor. And so even in the difficult moments, Gus Harmer hasn't played for a couple of games, but he, as far as I understand it, he's fit. He's just sort of building his way back in to make sure he's at fully match fitness. We'll see what happens to him tomorrow night. But if Gus Harmer's fully fit and plays in this game and he is at his best, that in itself is a bit of a game changer. And so I'm hoping that individual quality will help for United and win a tight game.
I hate Derby week.
It's horrible.
It's the worst thing in the world. Just the anticipation. I just can't wait for 2:30 on Sunday and deal with whatever's happened. I don't think. I honestly, like Ollie, I think Wednesday have got weapons that we can get at United. The one issue this season, really for us, for the most part, has been that Gassama and Masaba haven't fired at the same time often enough, and they've ended up one of them starting, one of them coming off the bench because of that. But yeah, I think that could be a weapon. We need to make the most of our chances, because I think that was a big thing on Saturday. Even if we'd gone in 2 or 3-1 up at half time, the second half doesn't happen. And I think it is going to be who's going to be most clinical. Yeah. That wouldn't favour Wednesday at the moment, given what's happened this season. But you never know. Derby day, cliche.
Chris, can I just ask you about whether Svante Ingelsson holds the key to Gassama and Masaba's form? Because when I saw you in that 4-0 victory over Plymouth Argyle on the opening day, I thought Ingelsson did some great runs into the channels that allowed Masaba, Gassama and the centre forward Jamal Lowe to combine in those central areas and really open the team up, and it was a lot for them to handle. Whereas I guess when Ingelson's not you don't have Ingelsson in the 11 making those runs. I wonder if maybe Gassama or Masaba have got to stay wider, and it actually becomes more difficult to get that combination play going.
The problem with that, as I kind of thought immediately afterwards, how long are we going to be able to get away with that, is that every time Ingelsson made that run in, we were exposed in the centre immediately.
I suppose you've got Jan Valery inverting into
in theory, but the whole point of Ingelsson making those runs was that Valery was able to kind of underlap a lot of the time because he was making runs into that right channel. Valery was able to underlap, and then as soon as you lose the ball, you're leaving yourself exposed, and that's what happened the next 3 games. Sunderland away, Leeds home, Millwall away. We just got hammered in midfield every time, because as soon as we tried to be adventurous in that way, we just got overrun in midfield. So I don't think we'll see Ingelsson in centre midfield for the time being. What he has done a little bit against Coventry, against Brentford, is start from the left as a left attacker, because he's got so many weapons in terms of, he's got a great left foot, he's got that long throw, which games like a Derby can be absolutely massive. He can get it to kind of far post with a decent run up. So I think if he does start, it'll be on the left, because I think you also need that element of being in the game in a derby. I don't think you can put Ingelsson in there, risk leaving yourself exposed, because in a derby in particular, you've got to win that midfield battle to have any hope.
And I think actually hearing that, but play Ingelsson in the middle, because I'm looking at that space and I'm thinking, well, if Valerie's going to come in and invert, if Ingelson's going to commit himself forward, I'm backing Vinny Souza to win the ball. I'm backing him to win that battle on as one-on-one. So if Ingelson's trying to come out, if Vinny Souza's going to win that battle, Jezrak Saki's currently free down that right wing. And so you've got to start thinking about that sort of tight matchup. And I think Rohl will not be as adventurous. I think he'll understand coming to Bramall Lane that you want to try and negate some of those difficulties and issues.
If you're playing Ingelsson off the left, Windass in the centre, and one of your wingers, Gassama, Masaba, whoever on the right, then you've got fundamentally 3 or 4 central midfielders in there, because Windass can just drop that little bit deeper. You've got Ingelsson covering on the left hand side. You can try to match them, overmatch them in terms of numbers and get something from there, and then maybe get Gassama or Masaba on their bike on the counter. I just don't see a world. You watch Rohl at 11:30 on Sunday, and you'll be like, why is Ingelsson starting in midfield? But no, I don't see a world where Ingelsson starts in midfield at the minute.
Is it the Sheffield Derby, or is it the Gassama versus Gassama Derby?
Let's get your hand up there.
That one up as well.
What's been both of yours biggest disappointment so far this season? Obviously, Sheffield United haven't had too many, but if you had to pick out something you'd like to see improve for the weekend and the rest of the season, what would it be?
I want to see a little bit more fluidity going forward. I think our attack hasn't quite clicked fully as yet. I think Saturday was the best we've seen. I think it was Kiefer Moore's best game. I think he linked the play really, really well. And we actually saw a really effective way of pressing into our opponents and making sure that they're really struggling to not just get into our half, but to get out of their own sort of third. And it was probably the most fluid we've seen. I think that's been the biggest disappointment, is that, if I'm being honest, Callum O'Hare's not got going yet. He's been off his best. He's not been able to get involved in games. We've seen moments. I think QPR at home, he was outstanding for the first half, but since then it's been bit part. It's been moments here and there.
With Hamer's absence a little bit though, Ollie.
Yeah, I think those two need each other. Well, no, they don't. I think O'Hare needs Gus Harmer. I don't think Gus Harmer needs anybody. But definitely that has seemed to coincide. And I think they'd got a really nice partnership in the way that they were sort of transitioning down that left. They would swap positions. They'd make the defence work to try and understand which one of them's going to go, who's going to commit. And so there's definitely something in that. But I do think he himself will need to take a little bit of personal responsibility in terms of he's just not been delivering for the football team at the moment. So I think, it's that attacking fluidity. I want to see a little bit more from us in terms of making those attacks stick, in terms of really punishing teams when we are starting to get on top, because that's the one criticism, is that so many times it's 1-0 and you're kind of thinking, I know we're in control here, but it only takes one mistake. I want to see something more going forward. I want to see that just click into gear.
I think with Callum O'Hare, he's an amazing presser. He's got amazing energy. He can link the play well, but his numbers are never that great. Goals and assists aren't ever that high. He had that slight period where he came back from injury for us and he scored, I think it was like 4 in 6 or 6 in 8. And then after that, he kind of went in and out of the team and then got his move. But he's never a player who has got big numbers.
No.
I've always felt like he can be a useful cog in an attacking machine that's already thriving. But whereas I think you can give the ball to Gus Harmer and he can just do something out of nothing, I don't think you're getting very excited at that. I don't think Callum O'Hare necessarily is that guy. I think he's the quick link-up guy, but I don't think he's going to play like that perfect through ball or be the goal scorer that comes up out of nothing.
Yeah, I think he's also a disruptor. You know, we talked about his sort of energy and the way that he gets forward. I think he's a disruptor for a defence, but unfortunately it's that final, I think probably it's the final reason that he's playing in the Championship and not in the Premier League, is that when it comes to that final decision-making moment, just shoot. Don't take another touch. You don't need to beat the man again. Just pass it, just shoot, just do the final bit, please.
I like how quickly you've reached this. I had to watch that for 4 years. I thought it would take a bit longer for Sheffield United to get to the same stage.
We're an easily frustrated bunch.
Talking about Jenny Gassama there.
And so, I think that's it. So I think he disrupts. I think he's really good, like you say, at pressing in terms of making sure that he's a body in there to really try and distract the defence, to make sure that they're committed to him, create the space for the players to work in. But it's just that when we've been relying on him to do that extra little bit, it's just not working for him at the minute. And that's why obviously the standouts this season, Jezrak Sake, Gus Harmer, they're the ones who are making that final ball. They're the ones who are doing just that final little bit that makes it better, that has the impact, that ultimately results in a goal.
Kris, for you, biggest disappointment, something you'd like to see improve for the rest of the season?
Taking the chances, making the most of periods of play. As recently as Swansea at home a couple of weeks ago, 0-0, middle of the second half. Wednesday, absolutely on top. Balls coming across the area from both sides, and you're just thinking, well, the goal's coming. And then I'm driving home, it was 0-0. I'm thinking, we could play for another week and the goal wouldn't be coming, because that's just the way of our play at the moment. And yeah, joke about Jedi Gassama, but he's typical of a player who can just burn past a player, get into a great position, but then he's got to check back 2 or 3 times before he's willing to get a shot off. Masaba can be the same. I
also think with Masaba, he's very effective in open ground where he's really running at people, but is he as effective in tight areas necessarily?
He can be, he really can be.
He can work the space for himself. It's just, often you're like, shoot now, and then he knows the opportunity's gone, and so he ends up taking a half chance, and then it ends up in the top tier of the away end or something like that, because he's given up his best chance. And there's just been too many times this season, even the last midweek against Brentford, we had a great opportunity to beat a Premier League side. We were right on top of the game, but there were just a couple of moments where the right pass wasn't given at the right time in the final third, and we've got to get better at that if we're going to make the most of what is fundamentally a much better team than last year, in a league where there were a lot of gettable teams, and there's a lot of points we've already left out there.
Every conversation we're having, every single question makes me believe more and more that we're going to lose this 1-0. I honestly couldn't feel more sick. As the conversation goes on, I feel myself just going more, we're going to lose.
If I've not broken Ollie by the end of this, I've not done my job.
Brings us nicely, Ollie, because we're going to finish off with our score prediction and scorers. We'll go around the table, see what you think. Gab, you're the neutral, so why don't you go first for this one?
Oh gosh.
Unless anyone else needs to go.
I'm going to go.
You are sat quite close, Gab, just be aware.
Part of me's tempted to say Wednesday, but I'm going to go 1-1.
On that fence.
Yeah.
Ollie.
All right, mate. Thought we were friends, but whatever. It's one of those, it's so difficult to predict, and like I say, the biggest thing for me is I am so scared of being a jinx. It's just run through the family now that I daren't. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to be a jinx. I think that United will win 1-0. I think it'll be a really tight game, and I think it'll be something ridiculous from somebody like Gus Harmer that ultimately makes the difference. But it's not a confident prediction.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. I'll say 1-0 United. That defence is too good, and an individual bit of quality will probably make the difference. Kris, back a Wednesday win for us to make it interesting.
The last penalty we had, Tuesday pending, was Michael Smith in the playoff semi-final against Peterborough a year and a half ago. Talking 69, 70 games. Josh Windass penalty, 93rd minute. Thank you. See you later. 1-0 Wednesday.
Excellent stuff. Ollie, are you going to be able to cope with that?
No, that'll finish me off. I think I'll be done.
Right, let's jump into part 3. Gab, it's time for your corner of concern this week from the Championship. We've got a few teams that have sliding slightly towards the bottom 3. Plymouth in particular are now in the bottom 3, actually. Yeah. But who have you picked out?
I'm worried about Plymouth Argyle because I think... I think you can accept going to Elland Road and losing heavily. My worry is I didn't see a strategy from Plymouth Argyle that would have increased their chances of maybe nicking something on a good day. And the fact that they didn't engage until the ball got into the defensive third, because Ryan Hardy was back, as Kris mentioned, and because they only played a flat central midfield trio, as opposed to playing somebody like Al Hadj, who might operate a bit more advanced for a bit more in terms of against the ball. I thought Adam Forshaw was the only one who tried to put himself about and get into tackles, but even Adam Forshaw's, I think, at the on his last legs a little bit, or towards the end of his career. So I really look at Plymouth Argyle and think, where's the engagement, where's the effort to try and combat this Leeds side? Yes, Leeds are a brilliant team, but I worry about Plymouth Argyle with no shows like the one at Cardiff, like the one at Sheffield Wednesday on the opening day, like the one at Leeds. That's 3 no shows so far. especially away from home so far this season. Yes, they've had some clinical performances at home, but I'm worried about whether those no-shows away from home are becoming a pattern for Argyle.
It's interesting because I've seen a few Plymouth fans saying there's absolutely no point, especially where they are in the country. There's no point going to away games at the moment. They've got 1 point from 7, I think, and getting battered quite regularly on the road. But Kris, for Plymouth, we expect them to be a bottom 6 team. Are we being a bit harsh, or can we expect more than this?
'Twas ever thus with Plymouth, isn't it? It's a difficult place to go to, home park, and like they've got a brilliant home record over a period of seasons. Even seasons when they've struggled, they've got a lot more points at home than they've got away from home for the most part. I think a result like Leeds, whatever the performance, yes, I think they kind of turned it in. They were hoping to just frustrate and get over a period which ended up with them scoring conceding 3 goals in 8 minutes. I think they were just hoping they could get through a period like that and then maybe offer something, but by the time it's 3-0, like before they know it, it's gone from 0-0 to 3-0 and the game's done. I think it's just one of them where if you're Wayne Rooney, you can just turn up and go, well, that one's gone, we don't have to play them again, let's worry about the next one. So, I don't think results like that automatically make them more of a concern. Like Gab said, that there's been a few games where they've not really turned it in. Rooney said he learnt his lessons from day one against Wednesday. I think they're going to do enough at home to probably outfight a few of the other teams down there, to be quite honest.
Ollie, for you, in terms of when does the pressure really come on Rooney, or is it the fact of he's going to get the season no matter what? I
think probably because of expectation, he's probably going to get the season no matter what. I think in terms of the expectations for Plymouth, I've got them bottom of the league. I haven't seen anything to really change my mind on that. I think over the 46 games, they will probably be the worst team in the Championship. I think there's been some positives. They've done some things better than I expected. I think some of their results at home, particularly obviously the eye-catching one being Sunderland that they beat, they are enough that you kind of go, okay, they're going to be more competitive than I thought. But ultimately, you can't just throw games away. You can't just go to places and go, we weren't going to get out at Leeds anyway, so tell you what, lads, let's just not bother for this one, just see how it goes. And to not have a single shot, I think it's only the second time in Opta record that a team has had not a single shot in 90 minutes. That's just completely unacceptable. And so, yes, that's not where they're going to win the points. Yes, Saturday isn't the day that they got relegated, because ultimately losing away at Leeds happens to everybody. But you've got to do more than that. You've got to show your fans that you are actually committed, that you had a plan to get anything from this game. And that game, if you play it 100 times, they never lose less than 3-0, because ultimately they turned up to lose 3-0.
Ollie, I would be more worried if it was a case of individual mistakes and they got battered 6-0, but you could feel like they had a couple of players forward, or they're getting the ball forward, or they created something and there was something. The fact they lost 3-0 but so passive, that's the thing that worries me the most, really.
Yeah, I completely agree, because if you see a team that's got a structure, they've got a plan, you start to look at, like we've played Portsmouth, and Portsmouth have had a terrible start to the season, but every time you see them play, you think there's a plan. You understand what they're trying to do. They don't go anywhere and go, okay, we've lost today, don't worry about it. They had a collapse against Stoke, but ultimately, even through that game, you could see what Portsmouth wanted to do, and it wasn't coming off, but you thought there's probably enough there that they will get better. Whereas with Plymouth, there's too many games I'm watching and saying, actually, they don't have a plan of what they're going to do. They're literally just here to lose and then move on.
As a fan of a team who've conceded 4 or more goals 7 times in the last year, I'd say there are absolutely games you can throw away in the Championship. Is it Sir Alex Ferguson said you're going to win 10 and lose 10? And I think it's an old baseball adage or something. You've got to win 50, lose 50. It's what you do with the 50 in the middle. And Sir Alex Ferguson used to say about, you'll lose a couple, win a couple, and it's the rest that kind of decides your season, kind of thing. I think when you're a side like Plymouth, they know what their target is. I think no Plymouth fan, I think, went there expecting a win. Yes, they expected a better performance. I think that's the point. Yeah. But that being said, if they go and win in midweek, Leeds is already forgotten about. Already. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Gab, we'll come to your Championship treble now. 4 midweek games. I believe these are all on Wednesday night. So Who do you fancy in midweek to pick up 3 points?
Coventry have turned a corner recently, and they've got the likes of Ellis Sims and Hadji right back to their best, which I think could be really important. Sunderland, I'm backing them to win at Preston North End. A few North Enders concerned, a bit of a lack of leadership question marks for them at the moment based on that 3-1 defeat to Bristol City. And West Brom, I think, are going to beat Burnley on Thursday night, despite their recent winless run, but I'm that unconvinced by Burnley. I don't think Burnley are going to score, and I think West Brom might get 1 or 2.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that Championship treble. We'll get that priced up and put on Betfred for you. You've got a bit of a busy week as well, Gab, haven't you? You're going to Sunderland on Saturday?
Yes, they got Coventry at home. Yeah, looking forward to that one.
Any worries with you for Sunderland yet? Patterson's out injured. We've got Chris Rigg a little bit of injury. Joe Bellingham got sent off at the weekend.
Really building up
No, I just mean that Gab is basically our resident Sunderland fan now, isn't he? Given what he said in pre-season, so
for the season, yeah,
still top of the league. But any concerns?
Obviously, it's not ideal. I think a lot's going to depend on how the midfield situation plays out. They have still got Alan Brown and Dan Neil in there, but it's who's going to be that third midfielder. They've got a lad called Alexic who came in the summer. Not an awful lot's known about him in terms of watching him play for Sunderland, so that's a bit of an unknown quantity, and I think that's going to dictate a lot with Joe Bellingham suspended, as you mentioned, and Chris Rigg out injured. And then I think Simon Moore's actually come in and done okay. Coming in for obviously you'd rather have Anthony Patterson because he's one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship, but I think Simon Moore's come in and done all right. And I think in the end it was probably a good point for them at QPR managing to hold out with that man disadvantage.
Brilliant stuff. Has anyone got anything else they want to say before the Sheffield Derby, and then we'll leave it there?
I love Simon Moore. It's always nice to give an opportunity to appreciate one of our favourites. I love Simon Moore. But yeah, I just think ahead of Sunday, I'm terrified, and I would advise nobody to bet on it because nobody knows what's going to happen, as we've proved around this table. I think so. I'd say go for that one at your own peril because that feels like an absolute nightmare to try and pick a team. But there might be some value. Who knows?
Josh Windass penalty last minute. What did I say? No, it just feels like it's that narrative of Wednesday at the moment. We just never get a penalty, and it feels like it's got to come to a head at some time. What better time? At Bramall Lane, in front of the away end. Fantastic.
Old referee late on wanting to make a name for himself.
Well, why not? I think to just pick up on a couple of things over the weekend as well, I want to give props to somebody who was sent off and dig out somebody who scored, actually. Joe Bellingham, having put in a wild tackle. At first he went as if he was going to complain and then was like, I'm taking that. He checked the player was okay, kind of apologised to the away end on the way off. I thought it was pretty good sportsmanship. Yu Hirakawa.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not having that. Like, Heckingbottom came out after the game and complained about the referee. That's not on the referee, that's on the player. That's just... I hate to see that, him just walking the ball in the net after that.
What a lovely, lovely place to finish. Thanks all for watching. Make sure you like, follow and subscribe to Sportsman Untitled. Get in the comments below to give us your score prediction for the Sheffield Derby. We'll be back next week with All Leeds TV. Let's see how their promotion charge is going. But thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you next week.